The last three lectures of this series are more geared around client interactions and group training classes, kind of laying the foundations for you leading public training classes for your community. I know that seems really intimidating, and I know it feels like you need to have all the answers, but the reality is that for some, depending on how you structure your group training classes and depending on how you kind of present those classes, if you're looking to just lead some free, easy dog training classes to the public, just kind of get your feet wet, start working with dogs and people, what's most important there is your positive attitude and a very foundational knowledge of dog training and behavior, and focus on the basics. We're going to talk about a little bit more. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next two lectures. But I debated including equipment in that conversation, but we can't not talk about equipment. It's a hotly contested topic in dog training, and I'm not going to pretend that I can get into all the nuances of that in a single lecture here. There's a lot of discussion that needs to be had. There's a lot of situational awareness when we're using equipment, and a lot of individualized considerations for equipment. I will say that for me, no equipment is completely off limits. That includes really controversial equipment like pinch collars, electronic collars, also called stim collars, static collars, shock collars. It's all the same thing. Nothing is off the table, but if I am using some tool that has a high risk of unintended learning happening, I want to be really, really mindful of that risk and weigh that against my reward and see if it is actually worth it there. But really, the reason why I want to make sure that we talk about equipment here is because if you're leading group training classes, the likelihood of somebody showing up with equipment different than what you're used to is really high. And it's our responsibility as dog trainers, if we're working with the public, to meet somebody where they're at. And maybe it's because they've invested thousands of dollars into that training equipment and they're very, very dead set on using it. And that's fair. If you spend a couple $1,000s on equipment and you've seen some progress there, I don't want to immediately take that away from you. Right? If we both reach the conclusion that this is not the equipment we want to use going forward, that's totally fair. And we might end up reaching the conclusion that it's okay to use that piece of equipment, even if I don't agree with it in that moment. Again, depending on the context and depending on lots of details about the situation, I cannot emphasize that enough. It's a very nuanced discussion and one that I'm more than happy to have in our Discord channel or in a more structured classroom-like setting, not kind of in a public social media facing forum, because that doesn't get us the nuance of the conversation that we really need to have here. But let's just start talking about equipment here. Reminder, aversive is anything the dog perceives as unpleasant. There is no equipment that is always used aversively, right? We've got some equipment that, generally speaking, it is used aversively, or it's really, really hard to not use it aversively. Things, like I mentioned, really controversial equipment, pinch collars, chain collars, static collars, stim collars, whatever you want to call them, citronella collars, anything like that, right? It's really, really hard to use that in a way that's not aversive. But I have used a vibrating collar for a deaf dog to establish recall. The vibration started out as a neutral stimulus. The dog didn't really care about it at first until we applied it, handed the dog treats, applied it, handed the dog treats. Vibration, treat, vibration, treat, vibration, treat. The dog's 20 feet that way. I vibrate the collar and he looks around going, where's the person with treats? Right? We established recall with that deaf dog. So there are ways to use some of this equipment in a way that is not aversive, but I want to be clear that aversiveness is established by the dog. The dog is the one telling me whether or not this is aversive or not. It's not me kind of logicking through it and saying, well, this harness shouldn't be aversive. To some dogs, it very well could be aversive. That harness could be aversive. And it's my job to make the best decision based on the dog and the person in this situation. Lots of tools out there. I like trainers to be, I like the student trainers that I work with to be reasonably comfortable with all equipment. If somebody does show up wearing a prong collar, even if you don't agree with that equipment, immediately taking it away from the person might alienate them. It might make them feel like they don't belong in your class, and that's absolutely not what we're trying to encourage here. But you should know how to fit a prong collar appropriately. right? It shouldn't be so tight that it is digging into the dog's neck. There should be some room there. So we're not causing physical damage. We can cause some pretty serious damage with any collar, especially something like a chain collar or a prong collar. Same thing goes for halter collars, the ones that go up over the nose. Those can be used very aversively. For some dogs, they're not they don't mind them, or the dog's saying it's not really that aversive. But I can use that tool very aversively. And for some dogs, that's extremely uncomfortable. For some dogs, that's more aversive than other tools. It's more aversive than a chain collar that's not being used for popping or whatever, right? We can use any tool ineffectively or any tool aversively. So we should have some familiarity. So even if you have no intention of using this tool moving forward, please just explore some of these tools, explore prong collar, understand how to take it apart. In case you're in an emergency situation, you need to get the dog out of that collar. You don't want to be the dog professional that can't unlock a prong collar when you need to. Same thing goes for a chain collar. If I'm supervising somebody in class, the chain collar is going the wrong direction. So it's not automatically loosening when that dog offers some slack in that leash. If it's not automatically loosening, I'm risking that dog literally losing consciousness in my class because it can continue to cut off the airway and the circulation to the head. So we want to be really cautious about these tools. So please do a reasonable amount of research about these tools, understand how they're used, understand how, have a practical knowledge of how to use these so that if you're leading a group class, you don't have to immediately tell somebody, hey, I don't know that tool. You have to take it off to be in my class. Because again, that's going to be exclusionary of those people. And that's not, at least not what I'm going for. There's all kinds of different harnesses. There is no possible way to dive into like every type of harness that is out there. There's back clip, front clip. There's ones that are specifically for pulling that the clip is a little bit lower to give the dog a little bit more ability to pull. Like for example, if you're doing joring or mushing or anything like that, the harness is going to fit a little bit differently. There's like 4 or 5 really commonly used front clip harnesses: Sensation, Easy Walk, Freedom, and then some like basic like Premier collar, Premier harnesses sometimes have a clip at the front. It's all about how we use these tools. Really, really, really important to emphasize to owners and to emphasize to dog trainers as well, that regardless of the tool that I'm using, I still have to teach the dog. Regardless of what, there is no tool out there that I'm going to slap it on the dog and it's immediately going to do exactly what I want it to do. The whatever equipment we're using is a management tool. It is like a baby gate in the house or like a crate, right? Some dogs might find the crate extremely aversive, and it's my job to set them up for success and to desensitize and counter condition them and habituate them to that crate. So be mindful of what equipment you're using. Don't assume that just because it's a harness means that it's not potentially aversive to the dog. I've had plenty of dogs with harness sensitivities, especially the ill-fitting harnesses that go really tight right here in the armpits. We can get some rashes and stuff going on. I want to be mindful of any of that kind of stuff. So please seek in-person support from a qualified dog trainer and behavior consultant and/or behavior consultant that actually understands these tools to teach you about them, because there is no possible way that I can get into it sufficiently in a lecture on YouTube. Clicker treats, toys, all these sort of things should be potentially in your tool belt depending on what situation you're walking into. Again, I don't want to vilify any tool. I know a lot of dog trainers that really, really hate retractable leashes. They hate flexi leashes. I've used a retractable leash very successfully. Yes, I've got a certain skill level, certain proficiency with long leashes in general. I will say they can be more difficult to manage than a non-retractable long leash. But depending on the context, if I'm working with a client with disabilities, I should be comfortable with that retractable leash because that might be the perfect tool for them to use with their big dog or small dog. So context is really, really important here. Understanding how to use that tool, understanding the limitations of that tool are really, really important here. Slip leashes can also be used extremely harmfully. I use a slip leash when I'm at the shelter every day because we're working with hundreds of dogs in a day, and I need a quick way to leash and unleash that dog. And the reality is that a lot of flat collars can be damaged very easily. They're unreliable in the hallways, and I need a really secure point of contact. That requires me to have a certain skill level when working with that slip leash to not put constant pressure on that leash, to allow most of our walk to be on a loose, open, not restricting, not potentially damaging pressure on really vital organ or really vital systems up in here. Any tool you use is going to require a certain skill level. What I encourage you to do, and what the rest of this talk is going to be about, is figure out how to teach that dog in front of you without the use of any tools. And I mean any tools. Figure out how to talk to that dog, how to communicate with that dog effectively without any tools before you start introducing tools. Let me show you an example of what I mean. This is the tools. These are some of the tools that I've talked about. The martingales here in the middle. This is a martingale collar originally designed for greyhounds because greyhounds tend to have smaller skulls than they do necks. And so if I put a regular flat collar on a greyhound, they're going to just slip right out of it because it's going to go right up over their head. So the martingale allows that to close up if they are to put that pressure on it. It can close up and not get back over their heads. Fantastic option for shelters if you've got the resources to be able to put every dog in a martingale, a properly fitted martingale. Fantastic. Great tool. Or if you've just got the ability to get everybody in a secure flat collar, also fantastic. We've got the back clip harnesses, front clip harnesses. I like attaching front clip harnesses to the collar as well, just for security. Doesn't necessarily give you more control or anything like that, but it is about security. So your pinch collars is probably your Hermspringer or some knockoff version of Hermspringer. So make sure that you understand how to undo these and how to redo them. Some of them have the clip right here. I've got a little quick release right here. Make sure you understand how to put that back together. If the owner has one of those on, they accidentally hit that and it comes off leash during class, they don't know how to put it back together because their dog trainer did it for them. You want to be able to step in there and put that back on. Again, even if you don't necessarily agree with its use, it's a good argument to just have it right in front of you to not use that as my primary tool. But if it comes off during a group class, probably don't want to be using that as a primary tool. These little harnesses like this can be great for smaller dogs, for weird body shapes, or it's just different body shapes, not necessarily weird body shapes, but different body shapes. You want to have some options there because there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to these. It's that chain collar I was talking about. Leash toggles can be fantastic. These have all different kinds of names. I never know what to call them. I just call it a leash toggle or a agility clip or whatever it is. It can give me a great additional point of contact, especially because it's got the little bevel right here that swivels around. So when I've clipped it to the dog, I can grab onto that instead of the collar and not risk getting my fingers caught underneath that collar and twisting up. Long leashes are fantastic. Long leashes require you to have a certain skill level to use them successfully. You can severely hurt yourself and or severely hurt the dog by using a long leash inappropriately. Please seek professional training on how to use these tools. If you've got like a horse trainer in your life, they tend to be really great at teaching long leash work because they're working with long leashes and horses. Slightly different context, but can learn some valuable kinesthetic skills from them. And then these are your head collars. There's some that clip at the bottom, some that clip in the back. Get some familiarity with these. If you need a quick way to get familiarity with them, volunteer at local shelter. Your local shelter is probably getting donations of all this stuff all the time, and they're probably more than happy to have you fit them to dogs and see what's working, see what's not. Most of these tools are about security, right? I don't want the dog to get off leash if they're if I expect them to be on leash. And I want to minimize my safety risk for both the handler and the dog. So have some familiarity with them. Even if you end up not using these tools, you should have a reasonable understanding of how to use them or how they work. Okay. I'm just going to talk over these videos, emphasizing my point about the key, what is so much more important for me, this is my personal bias. What's so much more important to me is that you have a very strong understanding of how to work with the dog with no equipment at all. You can work with the dog off leash in a yard, communicate with that dog effectively, do what I'm doing here, which seems like I'm just playing with the dog. What I'm doing is frequent consent checks to see if the dog actually wants to interact with me. This dog, Beryl, does want to interact with me. And then she doesn't. Then she's going to come back over and want to play. Really important that you understand how to do that. Get really, really, really good at interacting off leash with a dog with no equipment to back you up, no equipment to rely on. Establish those communication skills. I've got a treat bag. It's full of treats. You'll see me in a second try to use a treat to work with her. She doesn't want treats right now. There are plenty of situations where dogs don't want treats right now, and I need to have skills to work with them. And I've had plenty of dogs. There's that moment. I offered her that treat. She's like, I don't want this. Right? I'm evaluating in that moment, like, does she want treat? And she's like, no, no, thank you. I want to have something else. If I only had treats in my tool belt, right? And I'm talking about like a metaphorical tool belt. You don't see any other tools on me, but I've got keys on my belt and I've got a slip leash that I brought her out on. I need to have other skills, other tools, metaphorical tools that I can use in that moment to get that dog to want to interact with me. This is about body language. This is about awareness of your body language. This is about awareness of the dog's body language. These are the skills that we want to work on developing. And that is an example of a dog that is excited to interact with me. This is another dog that's excited to interact with me. Both of these are dogs that were in the shelter. I'm evaluating these dogs. This is either my first or second time evaluating them because in this context, I didn't have the ability to work more than that with the dogs. So this is a dog that we have reports of some severe fear towards people. We don't quite know exactly what the stimulus is that's causing that. We've got some reports of really severe jumpy mouthy behavior. So the dog is jumping up and putting his teeth on people, not necessarily doing a lot of damage, but this is a very big dog. I'm 6'3". This dog's a big dog, right? This dog's jumping up and making contact with my shoulders if he wanted to. Right, the dog's jumping up and makes contact with my face. This is a big dog. I need to have skills to work with this dog, absent of any equipment. Right now, I've got my slip leash on. He's dragging the slip leash around. I could just as easily clip a clip collar to him or a clip leash to him that he can drag around. I don't have one available in the yard at this moment. So I've just got my slip lead on there. But I need to have the skills. And this is a kinesthetic skill. You cannot learn it online. You need to learn this in person, and you need to learn it from somebody that deeply understands dog behavior. Learn how to work with that dog in front of you without any equipment, no tools, no nothing. You can communicate effectively with that dog, and you can make that dog want to interact with you. I'm going to link Amy Cook yet again. I think that's like the fourth video that I've linked Amy Cook's website, The Playway. I'm going to link her again. Amy Cook is fantastic at this. Really, really incredible at getting dogs to want to interact with her using minimal to no equipment. That is a skill much more valuable than you understanding how to use any sort of putative equipment or aversive equipment or neutral equipment, whatever it is. That's a skill you want to develop. That is my very, very brief overview of equipment. I know it might not be as satisfying as you wanted it to be. I know that you probably wanted me to talk about how to use all these tools. I hope that I've made a strong enough argument that the tool is not important. The trainer is the important part. Your kinesthetic skills as a trainer are so much more important than the tools that you choose to use. And I bet you if you develop these skills, you're going to be a lot less reliant on those tools. You're going to go like, just put something secure on the dog and let's work with the dog. The tools that I carry around with me, by the way, for me personally, tools that I carry around, I usually have a clicker in my treat bag. The clicker is usually for kids. If I'm working with a client with kids, I usually like the kids to use the clicker, tend to be a lot better at it than adults do. And it can be a great way to kind of team up the whole family. This kid is delivering the click. This kid's delivering treats, or mom or dad is delivering treats. Parents are delivering treats. That's usually why I have the clicker in my bag. And I've always got treats on me. I've always got some level of treats on me. I usually, honestly, don't have very high value treats. I usually have just some of my dog's kibble. And that's usually what I go into situations with, unless I know for a fact that I'm going to need something different. Because more important, and I sometimes have a slip leash when I do private clients. I'll usually carry one the first time that I go and then see if it's really necessary, see if we just need an additional point of contact. And I always carry a long leash with me. A lot of people don't have a long leash, they have a regular leash. So those are the only tools that I carry with me, and I work I'm comfortable working aggression cases. I'm comfortable working with dogs that are guarding resources, that are barking, lunging, growling at strangers out in the streets, or other dogs or whatever it is. And I'm going in with as few tools as humanly possible, other than my skills as a handler, my skills reading dog body language, communicating with my body language. That's the more important skill to develop. So again, probably not as satisfying as you wanted it to be, possibly, but hopefully communicating more accurately about tools is what we need here. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.